The job sounded simple. Clean some parts, carry some blocks, make a little summer money. But Frank Chopsky's locked shed had rules, his pink concrete house had secrets, and the boys who helped him build it never stopped to ask what made the blocks so heavy.
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for a little spooky in your weekly. I'm your host and narrator Enrique Couto, and we have quite the creepy summer tale just for you tonight. Something to help your blood run cold, no matter how warm it is outside. But before we get to that, I want to say thank you all so much for joining us here tonight. You are the hardcore spookies who truly celebrate Halloween all year long, just like me, and I am honored to have you here. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app because we never miss a Wednesday, bringing you a brand new scary story. And if you love what we're doing and want to support us in a very direct way, simply head to weeklyspooky.com/join, and for as little as $1 a month, get 2 bonus shows every month and over 5 years of exclusive audiobooks, creepypasta readings, and so much more. That's at weeklyspooky.com/join. Now is a perfect time to show your support for the show. But now, as for tonight, summer jobs are supposed to be boring. You show up, you sweat, you get paid. Maybe you complain a little. Maybe you laugh with your friends. And maybe, if you're lucky, you walk away with enough cash to make the whole thing worth it. But every once in a while, a job finds you. A strange man with a stranger smile. A locked shed nobody is allowed to enter. A pile of concrete blocks dyed a soft, cheerful pink. At first it all seems harmless enough. But when 3 friends start wondering what their boss is really mixing behind that shed, they learn that some houses aren't haunted after they're built. Some houses are simply built haunted. So get cozy as we head to our new job. Concrete Evidence by Gary D. up in Ontario, Canada. My nightmare began harmlessly enough on that fine, warm summer's day, but then quickly evolved as it inevitably spiraled into the cold, lifeless corpse of a traveling circus freak show spectacle that it truly was. Back when I was around 18 or so and living near Toronto, Ontario, Canada, I experienced one particularly hot and very humid summer, for which the associated bizarre and disturbing details and memories remain shockingly vivid and forever burned deeply into my brain. At the time, I was hanging out with a couple of new friends I'd just met in high school, and we were all busily and, frankly, quite desperately trying to find summer jobs. And just like me, Todd and Izzy were both brash, mouthy fuckers who, ironically enough, also possessed my same insane, dark, and warped sense of humor. One day, while we were all just kinda chilling at a local park, we watched as a rusty old piece of shit Chevy pickup truck slowly pulled into the parking lot. At first, we heard the telltale sound of gravel crunching under heavy rubber tires. And then all we could hear was John Cougar Mellencamp's Pink Houses loudly blaring out from his car stereo. Next thing we know, this weird, scruffy-looking dude with these wild, screwy eyes that kept darting all over the place steps out of the truck. After knocking some dirt out from the tread of his work boots by kicking them against his front bumper, he then looks, or actually more like glares over at us, and proceeds to slowly and clumsily hobble his way across the grass and over to where we're all standing. On first looking at him, and based on the filthy, badly stained clothes he was wearing, he looked like some down-and-out homeless guy. You know, like the kind you'd see rolling out of a dumpster in an alleyway somewhere, getting ready for an exciting night out involving the picking up of salvageable cigarette butts and foraging through the sidewalk garbage receptacles for any even remotely edible remnants of food. And whenever I really think back on it, about my very first impression of this guy on initially meeting him, I'm convinced that he actually looked a hell of a lot like an older and much creepier, if that's possible, version of Gary Busey. If you can imagine that and know what I mean. This complete whack job just stood there uncomfortably staring at us, taking his sweet, creepy time to carefully look each one of us up and down. And as things almost reached the point of no return, meaning being such a complete and bizarre clusterfuck of awkwardness as to be totally beyond repair, he finally said something as he stroked his stubbly, badly wrinkled-ass chin. "The name's Frank Chopsky, and I'm here to make your day." He then dropped his hand from his damp, pasty white face and proceeded to smile the absolute creepiest smile that you could ever imagine. Izzy, Todd, and I, all with our eyebrows raised, looked at each other as we slowly started to back away. As soon as he sensed our reluctance, he then quickly dropped his insidious smile and replaced it with a mouth that appeared much more serious and businesslike. "What you boys think about making some good money? And for doing practically nothing?" He went on, saying that he'd gladly pay each one of us $10 an hour, simply to help him clean the grease and oil off of a bunch of old car parts, and to carry a shitload of concrete blocks across a small field for him. He explained that he had a large tool shed out back of a piece of property that he owned, located on the other side of town, where he'd set up one of those manual hand-crank concrete mixing machines, which he planned on using to make somewhere like around 400 or so concrete building blocks with. Frank went on to say that he wanted to surprise his wife and 6 kids who were all out of town for about 3 months visiting with family by building them a brand new house, and not just any house, but a special little pink one. He continued on saying that seeing as his wife's favorite color was pink, because she'd always loved pink carnations, that he'd simply just add some pink dye to the concrete mix, so he'd end up with pink building blocks. He claimed to have built a very similar house all by himself once before, but seeing as he was much older now and had some serious back issues to deal with, he just needed someone to help him with the carrying of all these concrete blocks from the mixer across a field and over to where the house was going up. My buddies and I were all broke and desperate for cash, so we backed away a bit and briefly discussed it. Izzy chimed in first by saying, "Shit, man, $10 an hour for each of us just to do that? Hell yeah, I'm in." I immediately agreed, adding, "Hey, we've been shooting blanks so far and Nobody out there's even hiring right now. We'd be stupid not to take this job. Sounds pretty easy peasy to me. Let's tell him yes before he changes his mind." Todd was always the leery one, so cocked his head kinda sideways, nervously bit his lip, and then said, "Hang on a minute. We don't know shit about this guy. He looks as fucking creepy as they come. He could be a serial killer." Izzy and I laughed out loud, 'cause we'd heard Todd recite these exact same words about 1,000,000 times before, really any time we met someone new. There was even that time when we met like a 4-foot-tall 90-year-old grandma, which he swore up and down to us he'd seen featured on America's Most Wanted for luring little boys into her house, to never be seen again. Finally, we all agreed and walked back over to this Frank guy and told him, okay. Seemed easy enough, seeing as we were all young bucks and still had limber, flexible joints and strong backs. We'd certainly carried and moved a lot heavier shit in the past, and never got paid a red fucking cent for it. So hell yeah, why not? Frank spent a couple of hours one morning covering us on the routine. As he described it, the three of us would all just sit and simply wait outside the shed until he was ready for us, which was practically most of the day, and would then call us over when the time was right. Most of the time, all we had to do was just sit outside in the shade of a big oak tree, cleaning up oil and grease from a bunch of old car parts for him with some old rags. So basically just waiting on him while he was busy inside the locked shed, mixing up a recipe of cement powder, sand, gravel, and a few other special ingredients, all inside of the rotating steel drum of his small hand-crank mixing machine. And once fully mixed, he'd then pour the runny, slurry mixture into 10 individual homemade 2-foot wide by 1 foot high by 1 foot deep steel building block forms. Frank figured that if he could manage to make 10 blocks per day, working 5 days a week, then he'd have like 50 blocks per week, or a grand total of 200 pieces a month. And seeing as he estimated that he needed roughly 400 of them, the whole project would likely take about 2 months to complete, give or take. After the concrete mixture had been poured into all the forms, he'd then let them sit to cure, meaning harden, over the span of the day. And once the concrete had set and gotten hard enough, Frank would then turn the forms upside down, tap them gently on the sides and bottoms with a small mallet, which would then release the concrete blocks from their casting forms. Once he'd removed all 10 of the concrete blocks, he'd then completely cover them up by putting them into small, damp burlap sacks and call for us to come over to the front door of the shed, where he'd proceed to pass them to us one by one, but never, ever allowing us to as much as set even 1 foot inside. This always seemed to occur later in the day, a little while before the sun would set and it got dark out. Then the three of us would all take turns working in a kind of rotation, with 2 of us grabbing each end of a block and then slowly shuffling along, carrying them out to the location across the field where the new pink house was being built, which was roughly some 50 yards away. Frank insisted on having them all carried individually by hand, as opposed to what we all thought and suggested would be a much simpler way, which was to just wheel them over in his wheelbarrow. Unfortunately, Frank was a stubborn old coot and just wouldn't have it. We were really surprised at how heavy these small blocks actually were, and there was absolutely no way that one person could ever carry one on their own. After carrying about the first couple dozen or so, we kinda got the hang of it, and our muscles slowly became accustomed to the routine and repetition of the associated struggle and strain. We carried out this same repetitive procedure almost every day throughout the entire summer, working pretty much every day from sunup to sundown. He had told our parents that we'd gotten jobs as general laborers, having to perform the simple task of mostly polishing grease off of auto parts, and then, just occasionally, asked to carry what were basically a bunch of large rocks across a field. At first, our parents were a little worried and leery, but we assured them that they had nothing to worry about 'cause they really didn't weigh that much and because we knew what we were doing. And we also reminded them of the fact that we were each getting $10 an hour, which was great money at the time. Frank slowly built the house block by block and room by room, and as each room was completed, he'd then nail up a wooden plaque which he said had the first name of one of his beloved children on it. First there was Charlene, then Thomas, and followed by Ashley and Eric. He had a kind of scaffolding set up all around the house, covered in thick sheets of white frosted plastic, which kinda draped over everything. And on top of that, he'd also put up a 10-foot chain-link fence, with barbed wire on top, all around the entire property. Frank claimed that he didn't want any nosy neighbors or passers-by seeing whatever the hell he was doing. None of their goddamn business, as he described it to us several times. The only really weird thing about all of this was that whenever he ever heard any of us approaching the shed, or if we happened to knock on the door to ask him an important question, he'd go ballistic and completely apeshit, screaming bloody murder and warning us to stay the fuck away. Not sure what the hell that was all about. We were also curious as to why he entered the shed each and every morning, pushing a large black wheelbarrow out in front of him, containing a large drumliner plastic garbage bag or two stuffed full of whatever, as well as what appeared to be a small hatchet, a long-handled mallet, a bunch of towels, a metal bucket, and a large handsaw. He never, ever allowed us to set as much as a toenail inside of that shed, saying that this was his private and personal space which nobody had the right to enter. And when the workday was done, he'd always yell through the locked shed door, "Now we'll see you boys bright and early tomorrow morning, you hear?" To which we'd all then immediately reply in unison, "Yes, sir." After the first couple of weeks or so, it really started to bug the shit out of us as to how over-the-top protective and secretive he was about his stupid shed. What the hell was going on in there anyway? Our curiosity finally got the better of us, so we decided one day at the end of our shift to just pretend to walk away and head home. But what we actually did was hide behind a couple of large tree trunks on the edge of the property, so we could just sit and watch. As it turned out, Izzy didn't come in to work with us that day, as he'd had a nasty run-in with Frank the day before. So on this particular morning when we arrived for work, Frank immediately told us that he'd told Izzy to just stay home for the day, to sit and think long and hard about the shit he'd said to him earlier. You see, Frank was a total nutjob, to say the least. We tried our best to ignore all of his bizarre little tics, peculiarities, and other odd behaviors, and the strangest one by far had to be his complete infatuation with a filthy, grease-stained tiny pink teddy bear that he always seemed to have pinned to the collar of his shirt. We'd constantly catch him touching it, stroking it, and fondling its furry little belly, while either humming or singing this creepy, repetitive lullaby. Like we'd be in the middle of an important conversation when he'd suddenly, out of the blue, just lose complete focus, drift off, have the pupils of his eyes twitch and roll up under his eyelids, and then once again be fully absorbed and immersed in his disturbing little pink teddy bear fetish. And it was during one of these so-called teddy bear trances that Izzy made the big, stupid, and unforgivable mistake of actually opening his mouth to give his 2 cents on the matter. "You're a freaky little fuck, aren't you?" he said to Frank mockingly, followed by his trademark cocky, condescending little laugh. "Playing and messing around with a wee little teddy bear like that at your age, like you're a fucking 5-year-old. Come on, Frank, act your fucking age." I winced as Izzy said those final words, and then watched as Frank's friendly, doting smile quickly transformed into a frightening and very angry, teeth-bared scowl. He just glared straight at Izzy for what seemed like a full minute, without blinking an eye or uttering a single word, before finally growling out calmly and very methodically, in a kind of southern drawl, "Careful with your tongue, boy, 'cause you should never pull a mad dog's tail, unless you likes running, and then bleeding out." And then Frank quickly walked away. If there's one thing I learned early on in life and made damn sure never to forget, it was to never, ever call out a complete whack job or maniac on all the weird-ass shit they do. Trust me, I know, 'cause I've got a long, nasty scar sitting on the back of my head. That's always there to remind me. Frank, to be honest with you, could only be best described as follows: a complete and utter psychopath, wrapped up tightly inside of a raving lunatic, safely confined within a tight straitjacket of unhinged paranoia, accompanied by a steaming side order of full-blown 3-ring circus freak show, and last but not least, sprinkled generously with a multicolored and multi-personalitied serving of obsessive-compulsive pink little teddy bear fixation insanity. Oh yes, my friends, this most certainly was Frank Chopsky in a nutshell, with particular emphasis on the word nut. As the sun started to set and the shadows grew longer and longer, we watched anxiously from behind the trees as the shed door slowly cracked open a bit. Frank carefully poked his head out, and then, with a guilty look on his face, turned both right and then left, and then quickly right and left again, before finally setting a single foot outside. We strained our eyes in the low light conditions just as the sun started to disappear over the horizon. Suddenly, the shed door swung fully open, and we watched as Frank came waltzing out. He was pushing his black wheelbarrow out in front of him, crammed full of his usual array of drumliner garbage bags, hatchet, saw, and whatever the fuck else he had in there. But something new suddenly caught our eyes. We could see some large, white towels, stained all over, in a bright, crimson red. Like, what the actual fuck? We both squinted and blinked our eyes over and over again, and then turned to look at each other. "Are you fucking seeing this shit?" I squeaked out as I watched Todd's jaw drop down and mouth open wide. He looked like some giant, overeager, starved Venus flytrap. We turned back to look at Frank and watched as he meticulously wiped and scrubbed clean the hatchet, the saw, and, finally, the long-handled mallet. He looked quite at ease and appeared to be happily whistling while he worked. We strained our ears and listened closely, then faintly heard and immediately recognized the tune he was whistling. It was none other than the same fucked up, eerie little teddy bear lullaby that we'd constantly heard him humming and singing. We watched as he loaded everything into his truck and then slowly drove off, and instead of heading home, we decided to head on over to snoop around that damn shed of his. Luckily, we both always carried our pen flashlights with us. The sun had gone down now, and it was pitch dark out. We looked each other in the eyes, and then set off across the field. We approached the shed hoping that we could somehow pry open its one and only flimsy blacked-out window, or maybe try to jimmy the lock, but had no luck with either. We then went over to where the house was being built, and for the very first time took a really close look at the concrete blocks that we'd schlepped there over all these weeks. And as we strained our eyes to look at each block, our brains exploded in a synaptic lightning storm of disbelief, as we suddenly started to see up close all of the horrific, vomit-in-your-mouth, totally fucked up things that dear Frank had secretly added to the concrete mix. The first thing I spotted was what appeared to be part of a broken pair of glasses frames. Weird, I thought. Why the hell would Frank add this into the concrete mixture? Then we noticed a block which appeared to have a big tuft of hair hanging out of it, attached to what looked to be someone's scalp. Like, what the fuck? We kept working our way around all of the blocks, inspecting them from all sides to see what else we could find. We had to hurry up because we had no idea if raving lunatic Frank could all of a sudden just show up unannounced to do who knows what else. All at once, Rob let out a disgusted scream. "Come here, you've got to fucking see this," he yelled to me. I ran over and looked at what he was shakily pointing at. There, protruding slightly from the side of one of the pink concrete blocks, was about 1 inch of a human finger and part of a fingernail. Moments later, I screamed, "Oh shit!" as I stared down at what appeared to be a piece of bloody jawbone, with several teeth still attached. One disturbing discovery after another left the two of us frenzied and feeling like we had to throw up. 5-alarm freaked-out projectile vomiting, to be exact. Our penlights were frantically shining their beams all over the place as we tried to comprehend what we were seeing. We both started closely examining all of the concrete blocks, which we'd carried here over many weeks. Very quickly, our gasps of pure, mind-blowing terror filled the otherwise quiet night air. We literally gagged in horror as we realized that mixed into the concrete that Frank had been so careful to secretly prepare was a cornucopia of various human body parts. From what we could see in the nervous flickering of our penlights, this included countless teeth, various bone fragments, tufts of hair, muscle, tendon, intestines, skin, a patchwork of various bodily organs, and, lastly, lots and lots of blood. The pink-colored concrete building blocks that Frank had so meticulously prepared were pink because of all of the above-mentioned bloody ingredients. The final nail in the coffin was violently hammered in when we found scrawled onto one of Frank's handmade wooden plaques, lying on the ground nearby, the name Izzy. We both seemed to bellow out a loud, "Oh, fuck!" At about the same time, before sprinting over to and scaling the chain-link fence, throwing our jackets over the barbed wire, and then running like hell into and through the woods to get back home. We told our parents everything that had happened, who then called the police. But by the time the flashing lights and sirens pulled up in front of old Frank's house, he was already long gone. A short while later, a longtime neighbor and occasional drinking buddy of his came forward, saying that he was damn certain that Frank had never been married, and he sure as hell never had any kids. The only thing that he said he did remember Frank ever saying, from time to time, and usually during one of their late-night, heavy drinking sessions, and of course, while gently and creepily caressing his little pink teddy bear and humming his damn haunting lullaby, was that he'd always wanted to live in a house that had good bones, and to live out the remainder of his days surrounded by every body that he'd ever had a strong emotional connection with. Well, my spookies, I think we've all had bad summer jobs. I mean, maybe you worked retail, had to smile at people who thought a coupon from 1997 was legally binding. Maybe you washed dishes until your hands looked like haunted little raisins. Maybe you spent 8 hours in the sun carrying heavy things for a man who seemed just a little too attached to his nonsense. But hopefully, none of you ever helped a lunatic build a little pink murder house out of people. That's the kind of job experience you don't put on a resume. Thank you all so much for joining me, and a big thank you to Gary up in Ontario for the great story. And I'm giving you a little warning, spookies. This is episode 398. When episode 400 drops, it'll be a very special treat you will not want to miss. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app. And while you're at it, head to weeklyspooky.com/join for as little as $1 a month. Get 2 bonus shows every month, and so much more. And speaking of, I want to say an extra special thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names at the end of the show. And they are Johnny Nix, Kate and Lulu, Jessica Fuller, Mike Eschewey, Jenny Green, Amber Hansford, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much, and if you want to hear your name at the end of every episode of Weekly Spooky, just go to weeklyspooky.com/join and sign up at the $15 a month or higher tier. I promise you it helps the show more than you know, and we're about to start a brand new series exclusive only to the Patreon, so now is a phenomenal time to sign up. But now I need to get back to work. There's so much more fear for your ears I need to cultivate. And, well, it's a dirty job, but someone's got to do it. So, for myself, for my executive producers, Bobbletopia.com and Rob Fields, for my producer, Dan Wilder, and of course, my creepy composer, Ray Mattis, I'll talk at you next time.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.